Hey guys, I figured I'd just take some time, get a little palm rod video done. I get asked all the time about palm rods and what they are. Really just a finesse presentation type of system. Inexpensive, great for you know, those finicky, picky bluegills, shallow water. What the system really is, it's a very small rod. It's got a small spool, really just a line holder. You actually lock that down into place once you get your depth set. You've got your spring bobber. The spring bobber is really like the secret to this whole setup. That spring is paired to the size of your jig. So I got a little 3 mil jig on here. I'm not on big fish. I'm on little fish right now, but it's an opportunity for me to show you what's going on. So I've got the spring paired with my jig so that I can load that spring up, and you can see that bite. And again, I'm not on big fish right now, but let's see if we can get a couple of bites here. You can see that spring. I'm going to fish kind of down to them, and you'll see that fish stop that spring when we get to that point, when we get to those fish. Again, I'm not on big fish. I'm on a pretty good weed flat. Yeah, this fish are there. Pretty good weed flat. Lots and lots of little fish. Could keep somebody entertained for a long time. It's good palm rod practice. You know, little tiny fish. I don't know if you saw that spring move at all. It's a situation where, like, because I'm fishing a little plastic tail, I constantly want to keep that bait moving, and you can do that with a spring like this because there's no real weight to the spring. There's nothing to it. When you're using you know, by feel or rod tip, that fish has to actually get into your rod, really to feel that bite. Here, there's really nothing to this spring, and that fish isn't even feeling it when they take that bait. All they're doing is stopping the spring from doing what it was doing while you were jigging, and that's your indication that there's a fish there. I'm doing this a little sideways. The wind is going a little bit. Normally I'd have my back to the wind, but then I don't think you'd hear me on camera. So I'm fishing sideways. Not the best practice. But I'm fishing down to these fish. I'm constantly moving that spring. You'll see that spring now stop. Moving down to those fish, moving down to those fish, moving down. You saw that spring. I'm sure you saw that spring. Down to the fish, down to the fish. And constantly keep that spring moving. That fish, because the spring is so light, when that fish grabs that bait, oh, I saw just a little tickle there. When that fish grabs that spring, they're not picking up on the spring. They're just picking up on the bait, and because the weight is taken off that spring will come up, or if they decide to just run with it, that spring will go down. But you got to have that loaded spring on these rods in order to see that bite. Again, I'm not on big fish. I just wanted to show you guys what a palm rod bite kind of looks like, what the indicator looks like when the fish hits it. Hopefully you're able to see that. Tough for me to see in the snow right now. See the camera in the snow. But get that indicator going. You'll see that indicator stop or do something different. Right now I'm just jig, 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 jig. And I may tease it up. There, oh, you see, I see it go down like that. So again, I'm not on big fish. And you can use palm rods for big fish, little fish. You get those super negative bite, even on those big bluegills, sunfish. You can use this system because that spring is so light. They won't even notice. They won't even notice. You saw that spring kick up like that? That's those fish coming after it. Coming after that little plastic tail. Little tiny 3 mil jig. This is good practice. Good practice for little fish. But I wanted to just show you guys the spring. Hopefully you're able to understand. It's really just about the spring. Short little rod. I've got full control of it. I've got just a little swinging action on that jig. Got that little plastic tail on there. Yep. And that spring, again, is so sensitive.